Georgie, Georgie, come float with me. We all float down here. You'll float too. You'll float too. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Glad you could be here. Oh boy, I've done it. I've finished It by Stephen King. And I have a review for you today. And oh boy, I am so excited to talk about it. And I want to get right to it. But before I do, just know that there are a few spoilers that may occur during the video. So if you're wary of spoilers for the book or the movie, because I will be talking about the movie as well, just be aware that there may be a few minor spoilers here. Maybe even a few major spoilers. I don't know. This is kind of off the cuff. It may or may not happen, but just wanted to warn you. So let's get right into it. I have been reading Stephen King's It for... it's been a good year at least. I started out with the book, and I got about 200 pages into it, and I just wasn't feeling it. It was kind of a laborious read. I wasn't really jiving with the writing style. Maybe it was like so detailed and so character driven that I couldn't just get into it. So that was a problem for me, and I put it down for a long time, and then my girlfriend said, why don't you try the audiobook? The narrator's really good, and give it another shot. And so I did. I picked up the audiobook, and I started out reading along in the book, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to listen to the audiobook and forego the book, because I can do other stuff while I'm listening to the book. And I'm so glad I got the audiobook, because it reignited my love for this book. Because I did like it. I mean, the story was interesting and things like that, but for some reason reading it just didn't click with me. So listening to the audiobook really did it for me. So now that I'm done with kind of the backstory about how I came to finish the book, let's get right into the review. First off, Stephen King is just a brilliant writer. Oh my goodness, it's just an amazing, amazing book. The character detail that he gets into in this book is so utterly magnificent that you really know each and every one of the major characters and some of the minor characters better than you ever thought possible. Their motivations, their hang-ups, the things they like, the things they don't like, the thing that keeps them up at night. You get to know these things really, really well. And I love that about this book. I love a good character-driven book. And for a book that is set in a small town, like literally most of the story takes place in a small town called Derry, Maine, the world is massive. And that's largely because of the characters, I think. But you wouldn't think that a small town could be so interesting and so deep and well fleshed out. But this book really, really made you feel like you lived in Derry and you knew all about Derry and what was going on behind the scenes. And I really, really liked that. It was very interesting to me. And I'll talk a little bit more about the movie at the end of the review, but it was very interesting to me how the movies really, really focus on the antagonist, which is It, or Pennywise, or the Deadlights, or whatever you want to call it. The movies focus so heavily on the scare factor of the clown, but in the book, it's very interesting. It, Pennywise, whatever, takes kind of a back burner. He's kind of an afterthought. to the rest of the characters in the story. Not that he's not there. He's looming in the backdrop. He's just creeping on the edges. You always know he's kind of there and working behind the scenes, but the story is so focused on the characters and understanding them and why they are scared of it in the ways that they are. It really, really draws you into the story. So I love that about it. The way it's set up, it starts out at the beginning of the book, focusing on the kids after they've grown up as adults. They're living their lives. They've got their really cushy jobs. They've got a lot of good things happening in their life. Several of them are married and just going about life as usual until they get a phone call from an old friend back in Derry named Mike Hanlon, and he tells them it's back, basically. At first they're like, who is this guy? And then they start to remember, oh, yeah, Mike Hanlon, how are you? What's going on? And they start to remember their childhoods, and there's been some kids that have gone missing in Derry in the modern day, and that's kind of what's caused him to call them and let them know they need to come back and finish the job. And at first they're like, what job? But then they start to remember. And at that point, it goes back and forth. Like, you'll have one chapter that focuses on a specific character. It'll flash back and forth a little bit between their childhood and who they are as an adult. And that's how he develops the characters. It's a very, very methodical development of each and every character so that you know that character with a fine-tooth comb. And so that when it comes to the end of the book, you're not surprised at all by a lot of the things that happen because you've gotten to know them so well. It's really interesting. The character of it, whatever you end up calling it, and I'll go into that a little bit more as I get a little spoilery towards the end, but the way it operates is it takes the form of your worst fear. So some of these kids fear clowns, and so he takes the form of a clown. And I would say that is probably his main form throughout the major parts of the book, but he takes a lot of different forms that you find out about throughout the course of the novel, because he takes the form of their worst fears and preys on them, and that's how he lures them in and to hopefully feed on them. That's his modus operandi. That's what he lives for, is to feed on children and on innocence. So he comes back every 27 years, or at least mostly every 27 years, give or take a few years maybe. And we find out kind of later on that it's because he's just kind of hibernating. He'll feed for a while, he'll go into hibernation, and then he'll come back. And so when they were kids, 27 years in the past, they had these encounters with it. They lost some friends as a result, or at least people they knew, not necessarily friends. And the creature actively went after these kids and preyed upon their fears to try and lure them in and kill them. And it all started with the creature killing one of the siblings of the children, one of the siblings of Bill Denbrough. That's the name of the kid who lost his brother. His brother's name was Georgie. Georgie just goes out to float a paper boat in the rain, and it takes him and destroys him, and they find his little body, and it's just, it's heart-wrenching. Just this little boy, and everybody is just devastated by it. The parents go into this just kind of catatonic response to life and just completely detached from life, it seems. And everything is just thrown up into a turmoil because of this. But as the story goes on, you start to learn more things, not only about the kids themselves, but about about Pennywise. Turns out he was the last of a dying race that has taken up residence on Earth, and just so happens in this little town of Derry, and that's where he's chosen his feeding ground to be. And he even tells them at one point that I'm the last of a dying race, and I've come to make your world my own, and just really, really interesting things that you don't necessarily see in the movies to a great extent. So at one point towards the end of their childhood, as you get to that point in the book, they are able to break free of his spell and beat him. At least it seems like they had beat him, and then they have to come back and fight him again. And I won't go into a whole lot of details about how the book resolves, because I don't want to spoil it too bad. But there's a ritual called the Ritual of Chud that is involved, and it's a ritual that helps the kids determine what's real versus what's not real. And it feeds on kids based on making them believe that something that is not real is actually real. He's what's called a glamour, and he's been called different things in different cultures, but essentially he puts on a mask that appears very real to the kids that he seeks out to feed on. So that is in essence what he is, and there have been others of his kind throughout different centuries that have shown up in different cultures, and maybe even he himself at one point had shown up in different cultures, and that's how they feed and continue living on and things like that. His life essentially necessitates feeding on children. So it was just a phenomenal book. The character development I've talked about, the plot builds over time. You kind of know what the overarching plot is right away, but the little subplots throughout the book are just so intricately woven and amazingly done that my breath was taken away at various different points. I'm like, wow, these are insights that I never would have gotten in the movies. And I'm just so glad that I picked up the book and finished it out. Now, this is the point where it's going to get a little bit spoilery, so I just want to warn you, but it's really essential to letting you know the difference between the movies and the books. A lot of people are more visual and they watch the movies instead of the books, or maybe they watch the movies before reading the books like I did, or maybe they've already read the book but they haven't seen the movie yet. So there's a lot of different types of people who get into the story behind it. So I want to take this point to talk a little bit more about the differences between the book and the movie. The movie, as I've said before, primarily focuses on the clown. There are different ways that it appears in the movies, but it's primarily as a clown. You'll see the clown at various different points, sitting on a large statue of a woodsman in one scene of the movie, and he's holding his balloons and things like that. It's very, very much focused on the clown, and so much so that I felt that the kids and the adults that they grew up into kind of took a back seat to the clown itself. And that's typical in Hollywood. You want to wow the audience. You want to scare the audience. You want those jump scares. So they focused more on the clown and what he does, and he's frightening. Don't get me wrong. He is in the book too, but not to such an extravagant degree as he is in the movies. But I don't feel like the movies really did his character justice in terms of the variety of glamours that he wears. In the book, there's so many different glamours. There's a leper who offers sexual favors to one of the boys. There's a gigantic bird with orange feathers that torments one of the kids. There's, as it gets toward the end of the book, there's a giant eye that, lidless eye that just kind of rolls around the tunnels of the sewer and torments the kids. And the statue that I mentioned of the woodsman, in the book, it's Paul Bunyan, and the statue comes alive and starts coming after one of the adults, and it's all their worst fears. There's the mummy, there's the teenage werewolf, that all show themselves in this book as different variations of it. And I don't really feel like we got such great detail like that in the movies. And probably because it was such a short time period. I mean, what can you do with 4 or 5 hours of a movie, right? But I feel like the intricacies of Pennywise were not really fleshed out and shown to us in the movie. Another big difference that I saw, something that you just totally don't get in the movie, is the mind control techniques of it. It has literally cast a shadow of detachment over the entire town. Like, some of the things that happen, you would think that the people in Derry would notice it, but they just go about their daily lives. Oh, what was that? Oh, I guess it was nothing. It's like they don't see what's going on behind the scenes because he's put blinders over their eyes. And there's other characters involved in the kids' lives, such as Beverly Marsh's dad, who has an unhealthy fascination with her in a very sexual way, in some sense. And at one point in the book, Pennywise has just completely gained control of her dad's mind to the point that he's really not himself anymore. And there's other characters that are used by it to draw the kids in or draw the adults in and hopefully kill them and bring them to him. And he uses them as mind slaves, and you just don't see that in the movie. It's just not really there. And some of the characters especially are completely absent from the movie. Like at the beginning of the movie, we see Beverly's husband as she's an adult. Her husband's name is Tom, and after that, after she leaves him, there's just no other mention of him in the movie at all. He doesn't show up as a character in the movie at all anymore, and yet he has a major role to play in the book, in terms of his mind being taken over by it. And the same with Bill Denborough's wife, and the same is true with Henry Bowers, who was one of the bullies that the kids had to put up with over and over as they were kids, and he grows up into this just nasty, horrendous adult, and he ends up under the control of it at some point. And you just don't, he's not even in the second movie really, except maybe in flashbacks when he was a bully. But it's things like that I think I would highly recommend people to read the book, because you're going to get so much more. If you've seen the movies and they interest you, the story interests you, it really grips you, you need to read the book. And if you can't really do the physical book, do the audiobook like I did. It's a great read, and you get so much more. You'll look back at the movie and might be like, oh, now that makes total and complete sense to me. I had several different aha moments that I just didn't get in the movie. And you get a little bit more of its origin stories in the book than you do in the movie. There's one scene in the movie where it's briefly showing his spacecraft or whatever it is plummeting down to Earth and plummeting down to Derry. But in the book, you get so much more of that because the kids actually go into like a ritualistic, hallucinogenic smoking session to where they connect with the events that happened in Derry and how it originally came to the Earth and things like that. You just don't get that in the movie. So I highly recommend, if you've seen the movie, read the book. If you haven't seen the movie, I recommend you read the book first because you'll be better prepared going into it. For those of you that have read the book and you have not seen the movie yet, I'm just going to warn you. They change a whole lot about the ending. Now, I've heard that the movie is closer to the book than the original TV miniseries was with Tim Curry. I have not seen that yet. Why, I'm not sure, because I'm a huge Tim Curry fan, but I will at some point watch it. So I've heard the book is better adapted to the newest movie. But the ending is so different. It is just wildly different. Just be prepared. If you're a fan of the book, there's just a shadow of the ending from the book in the movie. They really focus on the base earthly form of it in the movie, but they even change that. But we don't really get the deadlights in the movie in a satisfactory way, I don't think, because, I mean, in the book, as you know, if you read it or if you don't, it kind of transports the kids to a different realm where they're mesmerized by these things called the deadlights, and that's how he traps their souls, and then he can feed on their bodies. It's just really strange. You don't get that in a justified way in the movie. I mean, that they have to make the deadlights something quite different in order to portray it on the screen, probably. I'm sure that's why they did it that way. So just be aware when you go into it. The ending is much, much different. Some of the characters that are in the ending there's more characters in the ending than there were in the book. I'll put it that way. One more character. So just be prepared for that. But it's really, really fascinating. In the book, you even get monologues from it, thinking to itself. The subtle kind of creeping fear that it is starting to have when it realizes, oh, these kids are serious. They seriously want to take me down. There's that subtle fear that just kind of grows in its mind that you don't really even see in the movie. So yeah, as I said, there's quite a few spoilers there. Not huge spoilers, though. I recommend reading the book. I do recommend watching the new movie. I have not seen the original TV miniseries, so I don't know whether to recommend it or not, but I will hopefully watch that in the future. And read other books of Stephen King, too. He is just a fascinating author. I'm currently reading the second book in the Dark Tower series right now. And, he's just, some of the books fall into a whole universe, multiverse that he's created. So really, really fascinating author. Make sure that you pick up Stephen King's It and give it a read. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have read it, what your thoughts were on it. if you haven't read it before, if it's kind of been a daunting thought to pick up such a huge book, and it is. It's like 1,200 pages. So you could pick up the audiobook. But let me know what you think. Are you more interested in it now? Are you more intrigued by the thought of delving into the characters in the book and getting a huge backstory that you would never get in the movie? I hope this has been valuable to you. I really do. I can't gush about the movie and the book enough. They are really high quality entertainment. One thing I will say about the book: there is a scene that involves teenage sexual relations. I'm not sure why Stephen King put it in. Well, I understand, I do understand why he put it in, but I also don't understand, because especially in such a conservative sexual climate as we have in the U.S., just be aware. It's in there. He has a reason for it being in there. I still don't think it needed to be in there, but it's there. So just be forewarned. They, of course, don't show it in the movie. They wouldn't be allowed to. It's illegal. That would not be good. So anyway, just be aware that it's there, and if you get to that point where you realize it's coming, you may want to skip past that part in the book. Yeah, it's kind of unsettling. That was the only thing that really, really bothered me about the book, that I'm like, okay. So I give this book 4.5 stars. And I'm honestly only docking it a half star because of that scene. I mean, really, that's the only thing that bothered me. I was just mesmerized. It was just a fantastic read. And so, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. And please subscribe to my channel if you're getting value out of it, if you have not already. And hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Make sure to share it with your friends so they see my content too. And as I always say, make sure that you are reading more books, my friends. I will see you in the next video, and I'm floating on out of here. Floating. Floating.